Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today and I am dressed for the occasion. Got the Swoop Gang t-shirt on because today we are talking about Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and again, it's not very good news. Not for us though, but for someone else. Last time we talked about Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, you may forget because we've been mired in bad news these last few years, whether it be the remake or yes, even the KOTOR 2 re-release. We learned that Aspyr wasn't necessarily delivering on their promise when they originally said that they were going to give us the restored content mod on Nintendo Switch at a later date. And yeah, almost a year passed by without any sort of update. I took my time and waited for some sort of update from Aspyr because I understand bringing a mod over in an official capacity may be easier on paper, but eventually I thought they'd communicate something, and as their Twitter and other social media feeds were continuously bombarded with "where's the KOTOR 2 DLC?" they never said a word. It wasn't until much later we learned that, as expected, the restored content mod being brought over to the Switch port was canceled. A heartbreaker at that, but it came so late. And the way Aspyr tried to compensate for that was by offering you multiple free games, one of your choice, one of them being KOTOR 2 on Steam, where you could get that and then get the restored content mod for free. To me, not the best trade-off opportunity. It reminds me a lot of Fallout 76, where they were offering people like 500 atoms, I think it was, because of what was happening, every single catastrophe surrounding the game. This was their way of paying you back. And so I received this the same way, that kind of backhanded, like, here you go. Like, we're not going to give you your money back, but here you go. Like, you may have bought the game for the restored content mod, but here you go. You get what I'm saying? Like, it just didn't sit right. Well, it didn't sit right for a lot of other fans, and now there's a class action lawsuit heading to Aspyr. So we're going to talk about that. We also have a KOTOR Remake update today. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, I am remaining as hopeful as I possibly can. So without further ado, let's get into it. If you're new here and you're into Star Wars Knights of the Republic, whenever there is anything happening with it, I do cover it. It's just exceedingly rare, but hopefully as we get closer to a re-reveal of the KOTOR Remake, we can begin our coverage in earnest once more. But let's begin with this article here from Video Games Chronicle labeled "Canceled KOTOR 2 Switch DLC Leads to Class Action Lawsuit Against Aspyr and Saber." It starts off by saying the title's announcement trailer, which was published a couple of weeks ahead of its June 22 release and is viewable below, stated that the restored content DLC was coming soon, and Aspyr subsequently said it would arrive in the third quarter of 2022. However, in June 23, Aspyr announced that plans to release the DLC had been canceled. As a means of compensation, it offered customers who bought the game the chance to download one of 7 games free of charge, including KOTOR 2 on Steam. Here is the lawsuit. Despite their failure to release KOTOR's restored content DLC, defendants refused to give refunds to purchasers of KOTOR, reads a class action lawsuit filed in July by Malachi Michelonis, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, individually and on behalf of all others similarly situated, which was spotted by The Gamer. Plaintiff felt completely duped and was upset because he had relied on defendants' representation that the restored content DLC would be released for KOTOR, it reads. In fact, plaintiff did not even play KOTOR after purchasing it, instead choosing to wait until the restored content DLC was released, but defendants never did. Plaintiff would potentially be interested in purchasing other games with restored content DLC from defendants in the future if they have the advertised content, are not deceptively advertised, and accordingly priced at fair market value without being artificially inflated due to the deceptive advertising. The plaintiff is seeking a trial by jury, an order awarding attorneys' fees and costs, and further relief, including but not limited to the remedy of disgorgement. The defendants have until October 4th to respond to the lawsuit. So we'll hear in the next week or so what's going to happen with this lawsuit. But yeah, this is something that people are celebrating because they feel like Aspyr completely worked them over here. Especially because a lot of fans were just trying to ask for communication. I know it's more anecdotal, but if you go to old tweets from Aspyr prior to this cancellation announcement, for a year almost, people were just asking, where's the DLC? Where's the DLC? An update, anything, just say something. And it goes to show that communication is key. Now, I understand when you're Aspyr and you're working with a license holder that they can't just snap their fingers and get some sort of comment out there. But the problem here, and one day we're going to see some journalists, I've tried to do my own digging, by the way, and as I've mentioned before, my source has gone ice cold, probably because they're no longer at the company, but someone's going to pull the lid on Aspyr eventually and figure out what exactly happened with the KOTOR remake, because around the same time that this DLC was in flux and we were getting no updates whatsoever, was the same time that unofficially you had Aspyr being pulled off the KOTOR remake because it was reported that Sony and Lucasfilms, they were kind of disgusted by what they saw and said, no, you're not working on this anymore, and had moved the project to Saber Interactive, which will play into our next story. But around that same time was when people were begging for the DLC. So I just feel like something happened to the Star Wars license here in general at Aspyr. Like, was it that bad that they just yanked it out from them and said, you're not working on anything from this license anymore because of what we saw here with the KOTOR remake? But who am I but just a man behind a microphone taking a guess? How about someone from the Restored Content mod team? According to The Gamer here, they found a quote from one of the members who was behind creating this mod, who was working directly with Aspyr to bring that mod over to Switch. And they said, the Restored Content mod team will not have any updates for you, so please don't message them for any information on the status of the DLC. We are in the same boat that you all are in, as in they have no idea. However, he didn't want to leave his response there and responded with his own message. That's a boring statement. Here's my actual take. Aspyr did nothing wrong. Quote me on that. Shame it ended the way it did. Now, we don't know exactly any of the inner workings here. There was no additional information provided, but he said quote him, so I'm going to do so. Someone very close to the project said Aspyr did nothing wrong, so I imagine this goes back to what happened with the KOTOR remake being pulled out from under them, and in turn, maybe the rest of the Star Wars license. A lot of people are very anti-Aspyr, and I'm really not trying to come across as defending them, but they never struck me as a bad company. They do ports. Like, I'm not trying to minimize their efforts, but you kind of had just one job here, and to become the enemy of the people in that way, you had to severely underdeliver, and it was never the quality of their products. It was just more so that there was no communication, and I feel like that was a weird beat for them, where normally they would have said something. So I just feel in my heart of hearts that it had something to do with the license transfer. It had something to do with getting the KOTOR remake pulled out from under them. That or complete negligence. They could have just been like, we'll be fine. Who cares? It's a small subsect of people. I just find it so greatly upsetting what has happened, because I do think the Restored Content mod saves KOTOR 2 and in a lot of ways makes it feel like a different game. The multiple endings, the bug fixes, like I don't know how many people have played vanilla KOTOR 2 recently. It's definitely a much different time, so to say, compared to when you play with the Restored Content mod. There's just so many added scenes. It really livens the game up, and it is a necessary part of the package. And to bring that mod offering in an official capacity after all these years. I remember first hearing about Restored Content mod on, I think, like a GameFAQs post years and years ago. And remember, Aspyr were the ones who kind of championed making that mod even more easily accessible by re-releasing KOTOR 2 with a, 1440p support, controller support, achievement support. They even added on top of that Steam Workshop support, and one of the first mods they brought in there was the Restored Content mod. Like, that's how Aspyr got into the people's good graces. They really did the hard, honest work to make these games all the more modern without, of course, fully remaking them, which they eventually earned the opportunity to do so, and it just felt like the perfect fit in my eyes. So it breaks my heart to see that many console players, even though, you could get a potato nowadays and go ahead and run KOTOR 2 with the Restored Content mod, but many people don't want gaming PCs, gaming rigs. They're not going to be able to access what I think is one of the best mods ever made. It really just takes all of the original content that was supposed to be in the game, packs it in, fixes a lot of things, and makes KOTOR 2 the game that it should have been. Outside of maybe a more conclusive finale would have been nice. But that is what's happening with the class action lawsuit when it comes to KOTOR 2. We will see just how far this one gets. We've seen lawsuits happen in the past where they crop up and just fizzle out because there's not much of an argument to be made. But here, obviously, I'm not a legal expert. Whenever I need legal expertise, I typically tap the shoulder of Hoglaw and say, hey, man, what's going on here? Break it down for me. But for me, it just looks like they have a case here because of how long there was silence for and how many people bought this with anticipation of the DLC coming soon, and that never happened until a year later. they canceled it. So I feel like there's got to be something here, and maybe people will be able to get refunds, which I think is what should have happened in the first place. They should have honored refunds. I mentioned in my review of KOTOR 2 on Switch that there were game-breaking bugs, there were a lot of issues with it, and that it was a wait for a sale. So I think now with some patches, it's a lot better, but yeah, I think there is a case to be made here. We'll see what ends up happening. That's me just shooting from the hip with no legal expertise. Let's talk a bit about KOTOR Remake to wrap things up here. So over on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors Reddit, my favorite place on the internet to surf around, they posted here, Saber Interactive working on unannounced AAA project from Star Wars franchise via a LinkedIn profile, which if you go to right now, the page no longer exists. Hooray! We can't even check the information. However, the understanding here is that it's never been officially announced that Saber Interactive is the one working on the KOTOR remake. The most we got out of it was Embracer Group saying that there was a transferring of projects and that Saber Interactive is handling something now. And the assumption based off reports, I mean, it was pretty much written out for us plain as day. You may as well have officially announced it, was that the KOTOR remake had gone from Aspyr to Saber Interactive. Originally, Saber Interactive was brought on board to co-develop the KOTOR remake before eventually being handed the keys to the castle. Now, you see here they're working on an unannounced AAA project because the reality is it's not been officially announced that, hey, look, KOTOR Remake, we're the ones working on it, Saber Interactive. It's still, even though it's a very openly kept secret, if you will, it's still supposedly a secret, not officially announced yet. So they couldn't put this on their LinkedIn saying, we're working on KOTOR Remake now. At the same time, to play devil's advocate with myself, I don't get why, if it's officially announced that you're co-developing, why when it becomes your own project, you may not be able to say you're working on this. I don't know. My big fear is that KOTOR Remake will eventually bite the dust. Hell or high water, I want this game coming out. I'm going to be selfish for a moment. Selfish Matty is here for a brief moment. I don't care what happens. I want this game to come out. I don't care how long I have to wait, but I want the game to come out. I want it to get a shot. If it gets canceled, I will never forget that moment when it got announced. And if it gets canceled, I will also never forget that moment. But I know as a diehard fan, I'm doing the wrong thing here. I'm asking for trouble. I'm asking for pain. But just the idea that, like, no, they're actually working on another Star Wars project. It's not KOTOR Remake. Oh my God. So I think this is pointing to the fact that the project has been officially transferred over to Saber Interactive. We'll obviously see in due time what's actually happening. Hopefully within the next year or two, we get a re-announcement of sorts. Because I think now that it's been traded around and there's just no certainty around the project, the best thing you can do is re-reveal it when there is certainty. Like, here's the gameplay. Here's what it looks like. It's not just a title card announcement. That's the most I can personally hope for beyond the game just still existing. But ladies and gentlemen, that's everything for KOTOR today that I wanted to share with all of you. I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts down below, so please share them. And with that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the heck out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.